Oh, you're
further
good.
away. All
Mm-hmm.
right, good.
You're good.
Oh, now we're streaming live.
Yeah, so I'm going to check on my page really quick because I like to hit the share button in my groups. Yes, and we have convo offline, people. I know you saw that. You didn't hear all that, but you heard some of it. It's all good. Thank you so much, David. Such a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Great to be back.
I think this is what you're like fifth time now, maybe.
I'm a regular. Pretty soon I get the T-shirt.
Right. All right. Yes, we are online. So if you're watching this, please hit the share button if you have any questions or concerns. And if I can ask them, I will. If I can't, we'll move on, because Mr. Aronberg definitely is very busy, but we want to make sure that we give him enough time to talk to the community today. I would always like to tell you he is a willing participant when it comes to the people of power, and I'm so grateful and honored to have him again on the show. If you don't know me, my name is Kitty London, host and creator of the People of Power Show. And every week I sit down with movers and shakers, CEOs, entrepreneurs, some celebs, and people who are doing amazing things. And actually, Dave, I think you actually fall under the celebrity category now, because you are like an MSNBC fave on there now. I think what are you, like a political analyst? Like, they call you all the time to talk about things. I think that's awesome. But you're seeing me today. Thank you.
No, thank you, Kitty. I love doing it, but yeah, I'm far from a celebrity, and I love the job as state attorney. And you can see this is my little makeshift studio right here in the office, and it's one of the great things about the job is that you can talk about legal issues that the whole country they're interested in. And because right now you're seeing issues of January 6th riots, what's going to happen to the leaders. You see the Derek Chauvin trial. You see the hate crime in Atlanta that hasn't been charged with a hate crime yet. There's so many issues that people want to know about. And that's just in addition to all the local issues that we deal with every day. So I'm happy to discuss anything and everything you and your viewers want.
Okay. Well, I know I'm not going to say the last time. Maybe it was the last time before that. We were talking about the Ahmaud Arbery case, because that had just happened. And, we were asking questions of why this and why that. And then after that, let's fast forward, then George Floyd happened. So we never discussed the George Floyd case. Ironically, they're doing jury selection now. So his trial is a little bit, I would say, it kind of got expedited because, and I'm going to ask this question too, Ahmaud Arbery was actually before George Floyd. George Floyd case is now getting a jury selection. People are thinking like, well, what happened to Ahmaud Arbery's case? Why is it taking so long for them to even start? Why does the wheels of justice spin so slowly? So if you can answer those questions, I think it'll help the viewers a lot to understand what happens behind the scenes.
Every case is dealt with on its own merits, on its own with its own personalities, its own lawyers, the questions of whether you want to separate the defendants. There are a lot of continuances that are requested by counsel. It just so happens in the Chauvin case, all the continuances have been rejected. So a lot depends on the judge. The judge has rejected all the continuances, and that case is moving along so quickly. Just imagine the killing of George Floyd happened less than a year before the trial started. That's amazing. And I think it's because of the judge, because also they have separated the trial to only try Derek Chauvin instead of all four of them together. And so this thing is going to happen. The trial of the other three defendants is scheduled to happen in August. But if Derek Chauvin is not found guilty, if he is found not guilty of all the charges, then I don't know what prosecutors will do with the other three, because remember, their main charges are aiding and abetting. Well, can you aid and abet a crime that a person was acquitted of? I don't think so. And so that's why a lot is at stake with this Derek Chauvin trial. And with that, I've been paying close attention to the jury selection. And I think that the overall jury panel is favorable to the state. I think they've got a good group of jurors who will listen to the evidence and just do the right thing. I do think there are a couple jurors that, as prosecutors, you may want to be somewhat concerned about. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but like one of them is a chemist. And, chemists, scientists, they like to follow their own rules, they like to once they get the formula in mind, doesn't matter what the argument is, they're going to go that way. And so you want to ideally find others, not a chemist. That's why prosecutors don't like lawyers being on the panel, because they know everything, right? So as far as the panel goes, I think it's overall really good. But if I were the prosecutor there's a chemist, there's an auditor. Those are the ones I'd probably be most concerned about.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know for people like myself who didn't go to law school, right? And I'm looking on the outside, when we hear about the charges that are brought up, a lot of times people will agree. And then a lot of times people will say, no, that's not right. When you see the knee on the neck, for most people, they'll say, okay, he did it, video, that should be first-degree murder. No less sentence than that. And then when you start hearing about these other charges, we kind of have questions. Now, I know what the answer is because I have a lot of lawyer friends who have taught me greatly on that. But can you talk about a little bit about charges and how the greater the charge, the harder it is to convict? And sometimes, like Trayvon Martin's case, if you go for just that one charge, it's going to be a harder conviction than you layer it out to maybe a third-degree murder or a manslaughter charge. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, please?
If you overcharge as a prosecutor, you lose credibility in the eyes of jurors. And so you don't want to do that. You can lose your entire case. And so you want to make sure that the charges fit the evidence. And here, second-degree murder is the strongest charge. And within that second-degree murder, the prosecutors are not alleging that Chauvin intentionally tried to kill George Floyd. They're alleging under a part of the second-degree murder statute that he was committing an underlying felony, the felony of assault. And so he intentionally was committing an assault on George Floyd, and that led to the death. That is what caused the death, and that's second-degree murder. If you tried to upgrade it to first-degree murder, you have to show premeditated, and it's got to be intentional, that he meant to kill him and it was premeditated. That is so difficult in this case that if you did try it that way, I think jurors could get turned off, could have quit on everything. I think that what you're going to see is a real debate over whether the evidence reaches a level of second-degree murder, and it could, but there's also a fallback to third-degree murder, which requires just a depraved mind, no intent to kill someone, just that you acted with a depraved mind. Chauvin's going to say, well, I acted in accordance to the police handbook, but prosecutors will show now the handbook never told you to put all your weight on someone's neck and hold it there for 9 minutes, including 3 minutes after the person stopped communicating and 2 minutes after you knew that he had no pulse. And so I think that you may see a third-degree murder conviction in this case instead of second-degree murder, because when you bring up the lesser charges like that, sometimes that gives a jury a way to compromise. Say, well, instead of the second-degree murder or instead of the lower charge of manslaughter, let's go in between third-degree murder. That's appropriate here. And that is also, I think, eligible for up to 25 years in prison, although under sentencing guidelines, he would get less. But I think that the evidence is there to sustain either a third-degree murder or a second-degree murder conviction. But just knowing the nature of juries, don't be surprised if they come out with the third-degree murder conviction as a compromise amongst all the options.
I know people, will probably be disappointed, but I think at this point, a conviction is something that's, needed. And like you said, you've been following this case, and I'm sure millions of other people. I mean, this thing has gone global. And I always wonder when it comes to jury selection, when you have these cases that have blown up on social media, how difficult is it for the courtroom to find an impartial jury? You hear people say, oh, I've never heard of George Floyd. Or I've never heard. I'm like, are you in a coma? Like, what?
Yeah.
Where have you been?
Yeah. You don't even want necessarily those jurors who say, I don't know who that is. I don't know anything, because those aren't the best jurors. You don't want totally a blank slate. You want someone who admits, yeah, I've seen it, but I can be objective. I can put my own personal feelings aside and just listen to the evidence. That's what you want, because that's what a juror is supposed to do. And that's why you can always get a jury, even in the most high-profile cases. Remember, here in Palm Beach County, we had the case of Newman Raja, who killed Corey Jones. And that was a huge case locally. But yet we were able to find a jury of the defendant's peers, and that jury convicted him. And even though you have people who knew or heard something about the case, but they were able to put any preconceived notions aside and just listen to the evidence and do justice. And that's all you can ask for. That's why I think this is a good jury. This jury was vetted properly by the lawyers on both sides, and I think they've got a really good panel overall.
Speaking of another national case, and you mentioned it, January 6th. I mean, who can forget? Oh my gosh. First of all, I think social media helps criminals basically kind of convict themselves, in other words, because right, you have people on live obviously committing crimes, taking pictures, and just living the best life in the Capitol, right? Like I'm still like not believing that this happened, because never in a million years would you think that we would take over the Capitol. And when I say we, I mean as Americans can do that, right? But when you talk about that, and you hear some of the people who've gotten arrested, I'm sure they're looking for still hundreds of people, but they kind of put the blame on who was last in office. I don't know how that holds up in the courthouse. I don't know. I mean, is that an alibi? Like, he made me do it, or I was I don't.
No, you can't say, hey, find me not guilty because that guy made me do it or told me to do it. You're guilty for your own actions. And the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th are going to be held accountable, whether it's for the lesser crimes of trespass, illegal entry, or the more serious crimes of conspiracy. And I think you're going to see some charges of conspiracy to commit sedition. And that's punishable by up to 20 years in prison. I think that's going to be filed in these cases. You're going to see some of the leaders of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, I think, charged with this crime. I think it's just a matter of time, because to prove that, you have to have an agreement between two or more people to forcefully shut down the certification of the vote. Well, it looked like that's exactly what happened. Now, that's just for the leaders, but for the minions who ran in there, I think they'll be charged with lesser crimes. Although, let's see what happens for those who were part of the assault that led to the death of Officer Brian Sicknick. They could be charged with felony murder, depending on where the evidence goes. And so I can just tell you that this is not over. I think the charges are just beginning.
Does it give the court a little harder task to prove who did what? Because when you're like in riots, you're like in a group, you're in a herd of people, right? And everyone kind of even though, let's say your intentions were to go there and just protest in a civil matter, and all of a sudden the adrenaline rush, people start running, you start running, everybody starts running, someone gets trampled and dies, and you get caught on camera, but your intention, like, how does that work? Because like, you were really not trying to do that. You got kind of caught up in, and you shouldn't have been there, obviously, but you kind of got caught up in that. Do you have a case to stand on to say that that was not intentional? I just was there and I got caught up in the moment. And does that work?
If you stormed into the Capitol, that's a trespass. I mean,
okay.
That you can't say, oh, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to storm the Capitol after the police were pushing us back and we went through the barricades. I mean, that defense is not going to work. But the defense lawyers would like to have them just plead guilty to basic trespass, because that's a low-level crime. What defense lawyers don't want is for them to be charged with more serious crimes like conspiracy or felony murder or some other crimes. Now, you ask, what if they just happen to be there? Well, a conspiracy can encompass everyone. You don't necessarily have to prove who pulled the trigger. If there was a conspiracy, a meeting of the minds, two or more people who agree to do something, and then one of them takes an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy, well, then you are all guilty of the crime, as if you were the one who pulled the trigger. I mean, it's like, for example, if you're going to go rob a bank and you're the getaway driver, you are just as culpable as the person who goes inside and puts the gun to the bank teller's head. You're all part of the same crime under the principal theory. And so that's why prosecutors can go after them all if they were all part of the same conspiracy, the same crime. And the defense would be, well, we weren't all part of the same crime. We're all part of individual crimes. Like, my trespass was different than everyone else's trespass. We didn't do it together. We were 10,000 people with separate crimes. And that's going to be their defense, whether to trespass or to felony murder or anything else where prosecutors try to bring in individual defendants as part of a larger conspiracy.
This is why I like to talk to attorneys, because I think the less we know about laws, the more crimes we commit, if that makes sense. And I'll tell that for people who may like, what? The less we know about laws, the more crimes we commit. And I think this is why I love to have, you and all the other attorneys that come on the show to kind of help us know what we're doing wrong. Because honestly, and I'm not defending, every bad person, but I do believe that there's a small percentage of people who will go into a courtroom and say, I didn't know I was committing a crime. And they're really, honestly, didn't know that they were committing a crime. I get what you're saying as far as a getaway driver. Obviously, you would think. But let's just say the person in the back that's sleeping didn't know what was going on, was just in a bad crowd and woke up and the cops were coming. They're like, I don't know, but it's just, we need to know. What
that person would not be arrested. If there was someone sleeping in the back of a car, didn't know that car was going to be driven to commit a bank robbery and just happened to be sleeping in the back of the car without any knowledge of the crime, then that person will not be charged with a crime. In fact, that person could be a good witness. Say, hey, what do you know? Say, I don't know anything. I was sleeping the whole time. But those examples are really rare. I remember when we were debating the issue of fentanyl and whether it should be a mandatory minimum, and there was a state senator who stood up on the floor of the Senate and said, well, what if, a kid is in school and someone takes his book bag, or he accidentally picks up the wrong book bag, backpack, and inside is a little bit of fentanyl. Now he's going to prison for many years because of your mandatory minimums. And that was ridiculous. I mean, I remember hearing that argument. I was like, you have no idea about criminal law. That person who accidentally picked up the wrong backpack is not even going to be charged. So, that's what we do as prosecutors. We have discretion, and we want to make sure that we can prove cases beyond any reasonable doubt. There's a really high burden. And if there's gray area, we can't charge it. We can't even ethically charge it, because we have to know before we charge something that the evidence warrants the charge to get us a reasonable likelihood of a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. And the whole criminal justice system is founded on that it's better that 100 guilty people go free than to convict one innocent person of a crime they didn't commit. So there are a lot of protections already in place.
I like that you said that, but doesn't seem, and I don't know, and I know because you work in the field, so you see things differently than I think people like myself who don't know all the ins and outs of law. It just seems like when people get arrested, it's the opposite. You know how they say you're innocent until proven guilty? It's like now we're guilty until proven innocent. Do you hear people think that way? Because it's kind of...
Kitty, you bring up a good point. In the court of public opinion,
okay,
that's true. There are people who will convict you before you have had your trial. You get a mugshot and it goes on the internet forever, and the case is dropped, and now you've got to go try to get it down from all these websites that charge you to take it off their site, and you get it down from one site and then it pops up on 5 others. And so that's a real problem. I think that we are quick in the court of public opinion to jump to conclusions, but as far as the criminal justice system, you are still innocent until proven guilty.
I just want to say, Councilman Douglas Alexander Lawson, I always give his government name, says the great Dave Aronberg. Hello, sir.
He is awesome. Doug, thank you, my friend. He is a great guy and doing a wonderful job for Riviera Beach.
Yeah, we may not get a lot of people to chime in on for because, people are working, but that's fine. Whoever I can say hello to and tell you hello, I will try my best. Now, you mentioned a good thing when you said key witness. Tonight, I am having the chief of police on from West Palm Beach, Frank Adderley, tonight, and I know we will cover that. That's one of the biggest things for police officers and solving crimes is the lack of witnesses. Even though we could have people go on live and it go viral and someone will get shot or whatever, the people that show up to court are totally different, the numbers. Do you see that as being a problem as far as people protecting the bad guy, or just saying that we will handle this on our own?
Well, I think that's a real problem, and Chief Adderley will describe it really well, where we know in many cases who committed the crime, but you have to prove it. And to prove it, you need witnesses. You want forensic evidence, but witnesses are invaluable. And if witnesses are afraid to testify, then we can't go ahead with the case. And it can be really frustrating. You've got police who work very hard to develop a case, and they'll bring it to us, and then a witness will recant, and we're like, well, now what are we going to do? And so you need to really protect witnesses. You need to protect them from intimidation. You need to give them the courage to speak up, because you can understand where you and I, after a case is done, we go home, but the witness has to go back to their community and sometimes, and live around people who may be close to the defendant. And so you can see why it would be scary for a lot of witnesses. So it is important for us to protect witnesses and to make sure they are safe throughout the process and beyond.
I think that's such a valid point that you brought up, because I know, again, in public opinion.
Kitty, I'm having trouble. There you go. I'm sorry, your audio went out for.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Very valid point that you made up. I think in Palm Beach County, a lot of people complain about the unsolved crimes that we have here. No one's doing anything, but you said something that was so valuable, that a lot of times it's the cooperation from people. Crimes are easily solved when you have the evidence and you have a witness. Those are the two things that you need. And if you don't have one or the other, it's kind of hard to convict someone. So I know he's going to talk more about that, but I kind of wanted, you said the right thing on because you're in the courtroom. You need witnesses. Juries you have to have a trial. But if you don't have anyone to help you all outside of the courtroom solve the case, it gets a little hard. So I want people to know that. And I don't know if there's something in place that's coming down the line to what they call, you hear about witness protection. I don't know. Does that exist?
It does. It does. And they have a more formalized process at the federal level. They also have more money.
Okay.
The witness protection program. But there are versions of that at the local level. But that's something that is really important, because witnesses can hold the key to doing justice or allowing someone to continue to do it again.
So COVID now, how is, last time we talked, I know the courthouse was almost closed virtually. I mean, it's like virtual now. What are we kind of back open now? What's the update?
Well, the courthouse has been open, but not to jury trials. Lately, though, we have had some jury trials. It's been slow moving, but we're opening up slowly but surely. And it's just tough when you have these really complex or very serious cases that require 12 jurors. That's harder to do these days when you have to have social distancing, a lot of precautions in place. And so, because also you have to pick the jurors, and you got to have, to get 12 jurors in a capital trial, you need, many jurors to be in a jury pool. So those are being pushed aside for the smaller cases where you don't need as large of a jury pool to select your 6 jurors. And we're getting there. But, as things open up and more people are vaccinated, I think you'll see us back to normal. But there's a big backlog. So our prosecutors will be working diligently through that backlog. One thing to know is that even though the jury trials have been shut down, the courthouses have been open, and our prosecutors have been on the job every day of the year, including holidays and hurricanes and pandemics and everything. Because if someone is arrested for a crime, they have to see a judge within 24 hours for first appearances, where they get a bond or don't get a bond. And a prosecutor needs to be there for that. So I've done those myself. I did one a day last week. And you do a lot of these cases at a morning at the gun club courthouse, and crime never sleeps, and neither do those first appearance hearings.
And I want to give you kudos, because I think you made the paper, or you did something, but for the prosecutors, you worked on a holiday, right? For them?
Yeah. I work every Christmas for first appearances to give my employees who observe the Christmas holiday to the day off. So I if I can help, 1 or 2 employees enjoy Christmas, that's what I want to do. So I do that every year. And I do it occasionally throughout the year. I did it again last week, and I had my little nieces there observing. One's in the pre-law academy at her school. And so they were given quite an eye opener. There was, it's one thing to see these cases on paper, but then to be there where you have a victim who was violently assaulted by someone in a hospital. He was there getting Baker acted, and then started punching the nurses. And here's this nurse who dedicates her life to helping others, and she shows up with a huge black eye and a swollen eye, and it just, your heart breaks. And it's something that's still sticking with me. This is why I do what I do, is to do justice for someone like that. And I went up to her, I told her that this person will never bother you ever again. You never have anything to fear from this person ever again. And, I just think it's important for victims of crime to know that.
And they have, that's why I like to, showcase people like you and people in our community, because I think we get caught up with everything that's going on right now, that there's not help out there. Like if you are a victim, and I think fear is the biggest thing that keeps a lot of people from getting justice. They're scared. It's like you said, you're scared of retaliation, but when it's a domestic, it's a lot more than that. It's you're scared, but you still love them. And I know people say like, how does
you
that
bring
happen?
up domestic. Do you know that in domestic violence cases, more than half of our victims refuse to cooperate? It's the only crime where you see that. It's normally underreported as it is, but even after it's reported, then victims will recant. And we will continue to prosecute those cases if we have the evidence. So we have a 911 call and other evidence that can help us obtain a conviction. We will continue the case, but sometimes you can't go any further because the victim is now saying, no, he never touched me. I fell down a flight of stairs. And so it can be a challenge.
And for people that don't know, you fought real hard for ex-felons to get their voters' rights back. I remember when we did a couple of shows, you were adamant about them doing that, and now they can vote again. How did that make you feel when you, because I know that was a big issue, and it took a long time for that to happen.
Yeah, I've been working on that for some time. I do think it makes our community safer if you can allow people who have paid their debt to society, served their time, to re-enter society and not live on the outskirts of society as part of an underground, resenting the society that has shunned them. We want them to achieve equality. And, the best way to reduce recidivism is to convince those who have served their time that tomorrow is going to be better than today. And when you take away their hope and make them believe that they are forever going to be unequal, then you're just going to make them work against the community and commit more crimes. And so it makes our community safer. Plus, it's just the right thing to do. It's about second chances and forgiveness, where you allow people to reenter society after they have completed their sentences. But even after we passed this legislation, it was an initiative by the voters, the governor and the state legislature enacted a statute to undermine the will of the voters and to make it harder for people to get their voting rights back after they have served their time. So they've made sure that you have to pay your court costs and fees, which are not part of the sentence in many jurisdictions. And in fact, if you can't afford them, it builds up into this huge amount with interest over time. And now you can never vote, even though you have paid any restitution, you have served your time, but because of court costs and fees, court fees, you're now unable to vote. It's like a poll tax. And I've been very much against that, but the legislature and the governor got their way. And as a result, not as many people as we would like have registered to vote who should be eligible to vote because of the constitutional amendment.
Unfortunate. And, this is why we have to get out and vote, people. This is we have to get out and vote and change laws and things like that. So I know we were scheduled for 30 minutes, and I know we're actually at that time. I don't want to hold you because I know you're busy, but if you had anything to say, I'm not rushing you, but I do know that you you have work to do. But I just say thank you again, and we always continue to talk because laws are always changing and people are always committing crimes. So we will definitely have talks more.
Kitty, I love this job, and I'm grateful to be on your show, and I just got this wonderful award from FALL, the Palm Beach County chapter of the Florida Association of Women Lawyers. It's the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award for Diversity in the Workplace. It's because our office is the most diverse large law firm in Palm Beach County, and more than 60% of our prosecutors are women. We have a very high minority population, and we have the first ever African-American chief assistant state attorney, Adrienne Ellis, who that's not even going to be her final accolade in life, because she will either be state attorney or judge or something else that she deserves, because she's amazing. And Deputy Chief Assistant State Attorney Alexia Cox, and this office is, I think, it runs well because we have diversity as one of our strengths. And so I think it's important for any law enforcement agency to look like the community. Because when you're dealing with a criminal justice system, we know about the historical inequities and biases that have been out there, and it's up to us to help do something about it. And I think we are every day through our actions and our words, and being on a show like this means a lot. So I hope you'll have me back.
Of course. And Dave, really quick, I don't know if you know, but someone just asked, are there any programs that can help with paying of those costs? Do you know of any that are helping?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a group called FRRC. That's the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. They're led by Desmond Meade, and they're on Facebook and all social media. They're on the web too, and they raise millions of dollars from people like Michael Bloomberg and LeBron James and others to raise money to pay off the costs and fees for returning citizens. And I remember when there were a couple of Republican leaders of our state who said that they should be investigated for buying votes. And my response was, that is not buying votes when you are paying off costs and fees to allow people to choose to register to vote. In fact, I said, not only is it not a crime, some would call it a mitzvah. And Kitty, that's a mitzvah is a word in the Jewish tradition to mean a good deed. And so it's a good deed to pay those off. If you want to participate, yeah, FRRC, look them up online. It's a great organization.
Whitney said, thank you for all that you do, Dave. So again,
thank you, Kitty.
But thank you so much. And again, yes, you definitely will have to come back before the end of the year. I'm sure something somewhere will bring up some more law talk, so to speak. All right. So thank you.
It's never slow in this business. And thank you, Kitty, for having me on. It's much better. I love doing this. And at least I didn't have to wake up at 5 a.m. to do it like on Morning Joe.
The other guy, right? But hey, you know, you're doing great. And I just, like I said, thank you for taking up the time and always, you know, answering the phone call when we pick up. And he does. So I just want to let you know.
Thanks,
all right.
Kitty.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.